Welcome back to the Digitally Transformed podcast powered by Infused Innovation. I'm your new host, Justin Starbird, and I'm welcoming you into series two. Today is exciting. I get to welcome back to the show Jeff Wilhelm, the CEO of Infused Innovations. Jeff, great to see you. Great to have you on.
Thanks so much, Justin. Great to be here.
This is pretty exciting. Looking back, it's been about a year since we've put out a podcast. Of course, a lot has happened. I have a lot of questions for you, a lot of things I want to dive into today. Thinking about, folks that are joining the podcast for the first time, give me a brief introduction on Infused Innovations and what it is we do here.
Sure. So Infused Innovations is focused on helping businesses of all types transform their operations. We focus on technology and innovation and really help them tell their story better, do better for their customers and their own staffs, and ultimately try to make sure that they can differentiate themselves as best as possible. That's often done through a mix of strategic advisory, the delivery of services in an expert way. Everything we do is focused on sort of a forward-looking approach and very innovative technologies recently that have come to market that allow businesses to do more better than they have ever in the past.
Sure. And now you're CEO leading this company really through I don't want to be too hokey here, but a digital transformation, relative to, AI and what it's doing for businesses. What does your role look like today versus maybe what it did when you got started?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's so interesting the way the industry has changed. And, it's nice that we're a smaller, nimble, organization that can actually embrace the change ourselves as we're delivering it to customers at the same time. So, throughout my career, I've always been pretty focused on the technology side of delivery and, within our industry space. And, that has manifested itself in different ways over time. There was sort of a big push for managed services. Virtualization took the world by storm, a decade or two ago. And, these days, as the cloud has become more pervasive and there's a big push for organizations to embrace work from anywhere sort of technology and modern work technologies, we've also seen this prevalence of artificial intelligence and machine learning changing industries. And that's true of ours as well. And my role as a CEO has changed from sort of the how do we deliver services with excellence, which is still a core tenet of our organization, but has changed much more to say how can we embrace new and emerging technologies and innovation to both push ourselves forward and help our customers do the same. It's a fascinating time to be in the space and being able to embrace technologies like chat gpt that we hear about all the time and the large language models behind that to help organizations really do more with less and help them be better stewards of the trust that their customers put in them.
Sure. You say it's a fascinating time. I'd say it's crazy right now. I mean, just to be perfectly candid, there is so much, going on. There's change all around us, of course. There has been, I mentioned in the introduction that it's been about a year since we've, produced an episode of the Digitally Transformed podcast, and with good reason. A lot has happened in AI and ML in the last 12 months. Talk a little bit about why you went dark, so to speak, or how AI has changed businesses in the last year.
Right. So, we were very deliberate about a year ago in becoming part of that OpenAI beta. And at the time, it was embargoed. We couldn't talk about what was coming. We all know now, hindsight being 2020, we all know what happened, 6 months ago when, Chat GPT became this thing everyone was talking about. And, people were using DALI and generating images and just going, the world was going crazy, like you said. But there was a good 6 month period there from summer of last year through the end of last year when we really couldn't talk about a lot of what was happening. Again, it was just sensitive, private information that we just couldn't talk about. we were early on to embrace the technologies that we're talking about now. We've been working with customers since 2019 on computer vision models and leveraging cognitive services on the Azure platform and things like what everybody's sort of become more familiar with now. In fact, back in the end of 2019, we took time to become certified in responsible, ethical AI delivery because we were so concerned about the technology potentially being used in ways that either it wasn't intended or just accidental bias being added into these sorts of things. So we took it very seriously. But again, in 2022, summer 2022, when we became part of the beta program for OpenAI, there was just so much we wanted to talk about, but had to deliberately be cautious about that. But here
Sure.
we are. The world has changed, and everybody knows what happened, and these new technologies and how they can potentially be applied. And we're here to start talking about that as well, including customer use cases and stories of things we've actually accomplished. It's absolutely, as you said, a bit of a fast-paced, change-heavy time right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk about it feeling like it all happened overnight, but really, the artificial intelligence has been part of our lives for years. It started with Alexa. I mean, there are other things. We were talking offline a moment ago how, Alexa's in our kitchen and they're in our bedroom and in the office and it's all around us. But no, but for some reason, folks don't see that as something that's as invasive as it potentially is, I suppose. But with ChatGPT becoming a international phenomenon, what really prepared us for this moment where there's been this seemingly an explosion of adoption?
Right. I mean, one of the things that's been a big differentiator is that, it is now possible to process so many more parameters, so much more inputs to build these large language models. And they can synthesize human interaction in a way that is a little bit different than an Alexa, or a Google Assistant or Siri or whatever, pick your AI assistant of choice. Those were very, let's say prescriptive, right? You could add new skills to them, but they were somewhat prescriptive. And they were more about, I'm going to ask it for a recipe or do a metric conversion while I'm cooking or, have it update me on my calendar or maybe some notifications about a package that's being delivered, right? Those sorts of interactions. But as graphics processing has improved and the ability to manage these large, ingress of data for large language model building and things like that, that ability to then transform sort of the interaction model to that natural language, sort of more flexible interaction, and then take it a step further and say, it's not just about asking sort of these common real world questions, which is great, but also about, interacting with it in a way that is specific to, each individual user's requirements and capabilities, including their business's data sets. So one of the biggest changes has been the ability, and we do this with customers right now, to take these massive internalized knowledge bases that they've curated over time. They might have to do with customer support. It might have to do with internal product documentation. It might have to do with really anything, sort of, unstructured data, structured data, whatever it might be. And taking that information, ingesting it into a large language model, natural language sort of integration, and allowing customers to query their information securely and allowing their staffs to do more quickly. That has been absolutely just a game changer because it really gets people thinking about what are the long-term implications of this? How does this, if I can ask a question of a natural language model and have it give me back real information that I might have had to spend an hour or two curating previously, what does that mean for me in my job? What does that mean for my industry? So us helping customers get ahead of that has been a real big focus for us the last 6 to 12 months.
It's funny you mentioned that because there's some built-in fear with that statement about relative to how folks are looking at these queries or the prompts that they're giving these language models, because now there's this thought that they might lose their job or they might lose their role or their position is going to be eliminated. You're in a spot where you're able to really give folks security in terms of how to implement this in the business. What are some of the fears that you're seeing initially? I mean, we're 6 to 12 months into this real change, but the fears are real and they're not going away. And and it takes a while to overcome those. What are some of the questions that you're getting?
Yeah, customers across verticals are asking us this question all the time. I mean, we help them build their strategic roadmap, so they want to know, how does this impact my strategic roadmap? The three biggest questions we get fall into sort of your traditional sort, for anyone who's sort of researched ChatGPT, they sort of fall into the typical three, buckets we usually hear, which is one, what does this mean for my business and my staff? Two, is it trustworthy? Can I trust the outputs that are coming from it? And three, is my conversation in the data that I put into it secure? Right? Security, ethical concerns, business and staff concerns. Those are the three. And we talk about this a lot. I mean, the model that we deploy, the Azure OpenAI delivered model under Azure Cognitive Services, it solves two of those easily. It is allowing for a private delivered data set, so your data doesn't leave the walls of your organization. So the security side is built into our deployment model. There's really no worry there. The ethical side, the can I trust the output of this thing, or is it just lying to me? That we address by making sure that every response that we give back to a customer is sourced. There's a superscript, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 after every single piece of data we return. And the customer in real time can click that superscript and actually see the source of the information that we're pulling that answer from, so they can vet the response themselves and feel comfortable about the data we're giving them back. The third one is harder to answer. And I would be, anybody would be, but I would be silly to tell you 3, 5 years from now anything about, what's the risk or anything like that. But what will it mean for my business and my employees, my job, that sort of thing? That's the one where I usually respond by saying, well, you're probably not in the next couple of years going to lose your job to AI, but you might lose your job to somebody who knows how to use AI. So the big difference there is, don't be afraid of it, embrace it, learn it, know how to prompt, know how to engineer prompts to get what you want out of it. Because if you don't do it, somebody else will do it within your vertical, and they'll probably get hired and do your job more efficiently than you will. That's probably the place to spend the most effort right now, is understanding that these technologies are here to stay, and knowing how to use them most effectively is the best use of somebody's time right now.
Yeah. Well, how do companies invest in that? Like, you say, embrace it and, ask better questions, or, learn how to prompt it. There is no school for that right now. There are no classes per se that, or I guess there could be some certifications, I suppose. But, how does a company, look at that and then, become better at outfitting their staff with those skills?
Right. So there's actually sort of two ways to think about this. There's the sort of academic answer, right, which is, there are infographics about how to do prompt engineering, and there are, recommended sort of like, you can ask to answer in this tone, or you can ask with this context,
Right.
or whatever. And that's sort of the academic answer. And that information's out there. We have infographics that we apply to, supply to our customers to help them do better when we're doing advisory around this. The answer I like to give better is, start using it and ask ChatGPT how you could ask it better the next time. So we have, our staff has subscriptions to ChatGPT. We use it internally, partially because we want to make sure that we can become better at it and help guide our customers. But we oftentimes will say, hey, ChatGPT, here's what I'm trying to get out of you. How should I engineer my prompt better? Give me 5 tips to better engineer the prompt. What would you recommend? And it's actually fascinating. It will give you sort of a curated sort of guidance around that. And then the model that we deploy with our customers is for internal use, allows them to slide a little panel out on the side that actually gives them some suggestions and prompts that they could potentially use to get better information out.
Yep. So when you're looking at a potential deployment, and I've got more questions in and around that, but you're looking at a potential deployment. What are some of the markers for you to say, all right, this is going to be really successful, or client, customer, you need to add this to your technology stack?
Yeah, so there's the technology side of that, and then there's the sort of data curation side of that. I don't want to be too cliche by saying garbage in, garbage out, because everybody sort of feels like, oh, hey, large language model, the more I put into it, the better it's going to be. And there's truth to that from the structural side of understanding how to communicate from a language perspective, like noun, verb, adjective, like that part. Okay, there's some truth there. But as far as the actual customer data being ingested into the model to train it to give a response that's relevant to a specific organization, it is not the case of the more the better. It is a case of specifically curating these combinations of question response, accurate response, question accurate response. Think about a customer support organization. If you ingest every single ticket that comes in, the output through ChatGPT or any large language model isn't going to be great. Because think about 90% of the ticket is troubleshooting with a user. It's not what's the exact question, what's the exact answer. It's all the middle stuff that happens to figure out what the right answer is. That's not always good to sort of ingest in from sort of a, if I ask this, I need to see this back, right? So that's sort of just a quick example of that. That's the curation side. The other side you asked about, the technology stack side. So yes, I mean, ChatGPT has, or OpenAI has APIs that you can leverage. Obviously, Amazon's got, APIs that you can leverage. Google, with their large language model built on, I think Llama, I think currently maybe PaLM, PaLM coming soon. That's got APIs that are accessible. We prefer deploying on the Microsoft stack. We find that the security model around that tends to be a little bit more deliberate, especially as far as most organizations that have already embraced the Microsoft stack. What organization isn't using, Windows or Active Directory or, file servers or Windows Server or Microsoft 365, Exchange Online, Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive. A good percentage of the world is running on that ecosystem already. So we find the ability to build in governance, compliance, identity management, sort of a security perimeter, using labeling and tagging to figure out who is allowed access to what information, making sure that when a user queries the system, they're only getting responses that are relevant to the information they have access to. So anyway, I could elaborate on that much, much more, but I think that hopefully gives a little bit of a flavor of how we like to approach it.
Well, and I actually have a question about that too, relative to Microsoft, because you think back to Microsoft heyday, 1995, right? Windows comes out. I mean, it comes out way before that, but Windows 95 was like, a huge breakthrough. And it was Windows 95 through the early 2000s. I mean, it was a lot. So, what is this combination with OpenAI, doing for Microsoft that's putting it, so far ahead, or is that kind of a misnomer and it's not as far ahead with their partnerships and its integration to Bing, et cetera?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So obviously Microsoft invested heavily in OpenAI. I think something like $10 billion investment or something like that. And Microsoft's got tools that OpenAI needs, right? Massive compute, huge data sets, right? That kind of stuff. And OpenAI has built something that is absolutely groundbreaking, and continues to iterate very quickly on it. The Microsoft of the 90s, the Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer Microsoft, where security was kind of an afterthought, honestly, is a very different world than the Satya Nadella-led Microsoft cloud native. I mean, I think something like 60% of the virtual machines or workloads that run on Azure are Linux. If you had said that to somebody 20 years ago, they would have laughed at you, because there was a legitimate push by Microsoft to say it's Windows or nothing, right? So you asked this question about how is OpenAI sort of changing the game for Microsoft, and I think their embrace of openness, their embrace of customer first, their embrace of cloud native, and getting people through a very difficult time with the pandemic about embracing modern work and security, something that we focused on quite a bit in the 2020, 2021 timeframe. Those sorts of things, I think, have set Microsoft up really well to treat this paradigm shift a bit differently. The biggest, I think, differentiator, and you'll see it for anyone who's seen any of the Microsoft Copilot videos, you've got Microsoft Copilot and sort of some back-end stuff around Codex and the ChatGPT and GPT-354, et cetera. Those sort of technologies underpin the ability for within the Azure DevOps or GitHub ecosystem for development to happen in a more natural language way, which really democratizes this sort of iterative and ideation-bound approach that a lot of organizations are trying to take anyway. But more practically, for the modern sort of knowledge worker that works inside Word, Excel, PowerPoint, right, those sort of tools, There's this massive change coming with Microsoft Copilot, which I talked about just a second ago. Watch the videos on Microsoft Copilot. It is absolutely incredible to be able to say to PowerPoint, hey, listen, take this slide template that I built, last year, this deck that I built for this other customer, then take this OneNote document or this Word document of notes that I have around what we're trying to deliver for this customer, and maybe a little bit of data out of Excel, that talks about, industry projections or whatever it might be, and build me a new deck, or build me a proposal, or build me a graph that's going to show me where this trend is going, or tell me something I might not be interpreting already. Tell me something I don't know about this data. And
Sure.
it's this ability to interact with data in a way that both allows an organization to do more quickly, like I said before, but also build this collateral that would have otherwise taken, time to sort of manually, copy and paste information into one format or another. Why should we be spending our time as, workers? Why should we be spending our time doing things that are copy and paste when we can leverage tools to do that and allow us to use our brains for the stuff that is finding real insights and collaborating with people and having a customer first approach and that kind of stuff. The stuff that I think still requires a nice human touch, at least for the time being. I think it's a good way to allow technology to improve the parts of our jobs that are not differentiated today, that are not unique today, that are just rote and repeatable. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, how often you hear the phrase that, if you win on price, you lose on price, and that could be, iterated across, whatever other phrase you'd like to use, but it is that human element that so often changes, a relationship or creates a relationship. I mean, thinking about how you and I met similarly, right? I mean, there wasn't I can't fathom an algorithm that would have put us together had it not been for the connection, of your team and ours from years and years ago. So, I think, I think you hit it spot on relative to that human touch and human element. And, that leads me to my next question about, what is the Infused Innovations advantage here? Because of course, you're part of the beta. You've been in a position where you've been, working with these tech stacks for years. You've seen, the change from the virtualization and the old models from a couple of years, decades ago, as you and I talked about previously and again offline. But tell me a little bit about your approach and how you're strategically pointing the company to help your clients.
So there are a lot of organizations out there that will say, "Ooh, shiny new thing. Let's, put some marketing materials out there so people come to us for that." Which, I mean, that is sort of, the way of the world, and embracing change is not a bad thing. I'm certainly not
Right.
saying that isn't a valuable way of gaining market share and something that people might be curious about. It is. But there is also this sort of, as you said, a long-term investment in solutioning and collaboration with customers and understanding where their businesses are going. So it's not a cookie cutter answer of, oh, we're going to slap Chat GPT on this baby and call it a day. It's more about, how do we align the changing world to your changing business and make sure that you're successful, right? That's a very different approach. Understanding where an organization might be going, how they might want to differentiate. It's a more bespoke approach. And, we take a lot of pride in both our ability to provide bespoke solutions to customers, but at the same time, we are still a technical organization. We came up through the ranks of, as I said, virtualization and security and cloud and managed services and all that stuff. We understand that organizations are more than the sum of their parts, and they can be more than the sum of all the people that are involved with them if technology can be brought to bear, if security is part of the equation, and if people aren't afraid of pushing the envelope and asking what could be. So that's something we do with our customers often. It's, we have these sessions. They're really a lot of fun. They're workshops, art of the possible, and more recently, art of the impossible. It feels like the ability to sort of sit with a strategic C-suite, leadership team within an organization, figure out where they're going, talk to them about what could be, ideate with them, figure out how they want to differentiate, what's unique to them, what's their value proposition to their customers, and how can we become a part of that story and let technology help them do better rather than be a barrier. for a long time, there's been this gradient that people have identified between security and productivity, right? If you're 100% secure organization, your people probably can't get their jobs done very well. And if you're a 100% productive organization, security might be an afterthought, right? Those two things tend to sometimes compete with each other. So we've often talked about, there's a happy sort of middle ground between those things for most organizations, understanding industry positioning and what regulatory alignment they have to have, what compliance initiatives, frameworks they have to align to. And I will take that and extrapolate it into a triangle and say you've got productivity, you've got security, and you've got innovation. And sort of that three-dimensional or that sort of triangulated positioning is something that a lot of organizations need help finding where they should live within that triangle. And that's something we love to collaborate with organizations around.
Now, one other competing element to those 3 points is also cost, right? And I think we're at a spot where it's not can I afford it, can I not afford it? It's more of are you in a position or an industry where you have to? And what does some of the costs look like when a company is evaluating these solutions? When you're sitting there and you're like, all right, well, hey, what is your budget? You have security here, innovation there, productivity, somewhere in the middle. Where do you help guide them or give them strategic advice relative to their investment?
Right. And cost, as you said, is, I don't want to call it situational, but it varies, right? Different organizations at different phases of their own innovation lifecycle will have different sort of budgetary assignments. Some will have, we have no money assigned to this, but, hey, our cybersecurity insurance costs keep going up every year, so maybe we should, right? There's that sort of one end of the spectrum. And then there's the other end, which is we know we need to invest in innovation because if we don't, our competitor will, and it's game over, right? So, and then everything in between, right? And there's a wide gulf there. And it varies by vertical, it varies by organizational size, it varies by regulatory alignment, right? I have to be SOC 2, I have to be HIPAA, I have to be PCI, I'm Sarbanes-Oxley, or all the way to, no, I just want to innovate because it sounds like something we should do. And I don't have to really fall under any of those frameworks. Right. So as you said, sort of like everybody wants to know, what's it going to cost me? And of course, there's no one size fits all answer. We love to start with a very inexpensive workshop so we can do discovery and figure out what is the right fit for a specific organization. What is the right objective and roadmap for that organization? What's some low hanging fruit we can start showing quick time to value around. So it's not like, oh, listen, the only way to work with Infused Innovations is like working with Accenture, write $1 million check and we'll throw some people in your conference room and, everybody's happy. Nobody's happy, right? That's not the way of the world. That's not how we work. I know it's not how you work.
Yeah.
We work with our customers in a collaborative way to understand what they need to do, help them understand what they need to do, and what low-hanging fruit can we start, ideating around and showing some real-time quick time to value around. It does not cost a lot to do that. Certainly less than hiring somebody, full time to be sort of an innovation champion within an organization or security champion within an organization. We just frankly get so much interest and excitement out of doing that passionate work with our customers. In many cases, it's self-funding. We had a customer we worked with on a really interesting project, started with workshops, ideated, built them some computer vision models. Ultimately, it grew their business in a way that got them acquired. They were acquired by an international organization. Microsoft wrote a use case study around them. And everybody's happy. It's a really great story. And we would love to, whether, a customer's goal is M&A or whether it's just, I want to succeed or I want to stay relevant. We're happy to work with customers in any phase of that story.
You have a webinar coming up, OpenAI Unleashed. It's empowering organizational productivity. We're aiming to do that on June 22nd at noon Eastern or noon local time, depending where you are. Tell me a little bit about that, because you're going to be pulling in some of the case studies that you mentioned that you've actually had success with and showing how this can be installed and used. You're going to be talking a little bit about just some of the advantages of incorporating AI into an organization, but you're also talking about productivity and giving your team somewhat of the keys to be impactful. Tell me a little bit about what the presentation is going to be about and why people should tune in.
Yeah, I mean, we would love anybody to tune in if they've got questions about sort of the current state, how we got to where we are, and what does the current state look like. Of course, we're a strategic advisory, roadmap delivery type organization. So we're going to be talking about where this stuff is going and what people should sort of keep their eye on, which is important, I think, for anybody to sort of, start thinking about. And then, as you said, we're going to talk about productivity use cases, customer stories that we're actually doing, in real time or have just wrapped up, and really give people a sense of how it can be applied, sort of real world examples, and then some demos. We're going to be opening up the hood and showing people what the technology looks like. We've got an engineer on our team who's been playing with the technology again for like a year at this point, and is going to show a bit of the ecosystem and just a couple examples to get people interested or excited. If you're a novice and you've never used it, this is a great way to get up to speed quickly. If you've played with Chat GPT, maybe you're on the pro plan and you pay $20 a month to have access to it. It's still a great use of your, an hour of your time, because you'll probably come out with some better ways of thinking about how it could be applied to your organization or organizations you might work with.
Yeah, nothing like going live with a demo on a webinar and saying, hey, here's what we do.
Yeah, we all know the story of live demos on webinars, and we're going to cross our fingers and hope the technology gods smile on us.
One of the things you mentioned was, looking forward. What are some things that you see coming, relative to OpenAI, its adoption and how it's being used, by businesses?
Right. So without getting too in the weeds, increasing number of parameters, increasing number of tokens that can be used. Like there's a technical answer there, which is, up and to the right? More data, better conversation, more truth, the ability for there to be plugins, which we're going to talk about a little bit, which allow for sort of the tool to use tools, right? If you think about sort of it from a human evolution perspective, and a baby going from birth to taking its first steps to making its first words to using blocks, and then eventually playing with Legos, and then eventually going to school. We all can sort of picture that. Anyone who's a parent or has worked with a child can understand that, right? It's this sort of iterative, learning-based approach. I would think about the evolution of ChatGPT and other, sort of GPT and AI ML-based technologies in that very same way. So the plug-in model allows for this extensibility to say, all right, we can already have a conversation, but now use this tool to do this, or use this other tool to do that, or chain these tools together to do this other thing that nobody had predicted. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So there's the technical answer. There's the what's coming from a capabilities perspective, which we're going to touch on with plugins and a few other things. And then there's the use cases and how can this be applied, and how can I use it within the walls of my organization securely and ethically and trustworthily. I don't know if that's a word, but in a trustworthy way.
It is today.
It is today. And we're going to talk about all that stuff, and it's going to be a good time. Hopefully people get a lot out of it. We'll leave some room at the end for question and answer. And of course, we've always got the ability for people to reach out to our team. We can put on a one-on-one or a customer-specific workshop. If you come away from the webinar and you say, man, I wish I brought my entire leadership team, let us come and give a one-on-one workshop to your organization. Let us help you see how it can maybe apply to your specific customers or your specific use cases.
So I asked, what's next in the industry, but what's next for Infused Innovations?
So Infused Innovations is, making sure that we're working with our customers every day to best understand not just what exists in the ecosystem today, but as you said, where it's going. I think the biggest challenge is a lot of companies, especially ones that aren't in the tech industry, tend to be a bit reactive, right? They wait to see what is happening. They don't want to be on the cutting edge, which I get. but they wait to see what their competitors are doing. But the problem with that, of course, is that if you wait to see what your competitor is doing, that means your competitor started doing it a year ago because now they're actually doing it in a production ready way, or 6 months ago or whatever that timeline looked like. So we try and we plan to continue trying to help our customers understand what is next for me, right? My organization, and how can we be ahead of the curve and not be the people who are watching everybody else and see what they're doing, but become the organization that people are watching, to become the leader within our space, to help push that message forward and help other organizations, our customer organizations, differentiate themselves as best as possible.
Yeah, I love that when you say, if they wait for their competitors and see what they're doing, by the time they see that, not only has it been 6 months, but they've already had success, which is the only reason why they're saying it anyway, right? No,
Absolutely.
no one goes, oh, hey, I tried it, it sucked, but we're keeping going.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so true, right? It's the I'm trying to remember what the term is in psychology for this, but there's this whole concept of only is it survivorship bias? It might be that. Either way, the point is it's the things that survive that we that we use as our analysis points. And you're absolutely right. I mean, why not be the company that is innovating and ideating and trying 10 different things, knowing that two might actually stick? But we can help organizations infuse this philosophy of innovation into their organization and become those organizations that try 10 things, try 5 things every single year, to know that they're pushing the envelope forward and becoming a model for the rest of their industry to watch.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm really thankful to have had the opportunity to hear you talk on all of these topics, and and to not just hear where we've come from, but also where we are today and then where we're going. I think that's awesome. I think the webinar will be great. Again, that'll be on June 22nd. It is the OpenAI Unleashed: Empowering Organizational Productivity, that is powered by Infused Innovations. And there's a link on LinkedIn. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for joining me on the Series 2 kickoff show, I guess is what we'll call it today. This has been pretty great. Thanks for coming.
Oh, thanks so much. It was great chatting with you about it.
Likewise. Well, on behalf of my guest, CEO of Infused Innovations, Jeff Wilhelm, my name is Justin Starbird.